Good morning. This is Anna Crowe with the Get Real podcast, where CEOs, CMOs, and communications experts share their real advice. It's 5 questions under 9 minutes because we get to it real fast. So let's get to it. I'm so excited to have Jeff join us this morning. In a few sentences, could you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Hi, and I appreciate you having me on today. My name's Jeff Lopes. I'm an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur from Toronto, Canada. I've been at it for about 25 years. I'm a proud dad of 2 amazing, I call them super kids, super active kids, 12 and a 14-year-old, married for almost 18 years. And like I said, I'm a podcast host. I coach entrepreneurial dads. I'm an author to a #1 selling book called Entrepreneurial Dad. And I'm a serial entrepreneur. I love building and growing and exiting things, just building them for people and passing them on. That's me in a little nutshell.
I love it. You have such a rich background, so many different things that you're involved with, from the organizations and businesses, like you said, scaling, selling, books, etc. And I bet a big part of it is creating authentic connections with people, right? Customers, employees, partners, vendors, everybody. So this is what this podcast is about getting real and advice for creating those connections. I hear from other leaders that creating authentic connections can be challenging when it's noisy out there. And what is your take on that?
I mean, when you're setting a business, I think the biggest aspect of starting a company is creating your core values. And once you have preset core values, your mission statements, to your branding, to your alignment, to your social media, everything's got to be authentic all the way through. And once you have proper core values, I mean core values where it's like your customers' values and their thoughts and their process comes through first, and being the honesty is a core value. So having a direct core values and having your staff, your company, everything aligned and understanding the core values, and everybody's working on the same path. I mean, you could be as authentic as you can. And I think nowadays in social media, being connect to our customers, being authentic to our customers. We live in a digital age where it's so easy to be authentic and be real, but it's also very easily to pass along as not being authentic, not being real. So it's very important to set your core values, and then, like I said, drive your branding, your mission statements, everything around your core values, and your customers will be there and they'll be authentic with it, and learning how to pivot with it as well, right?
Yeah, I love that. And to your point, establishing them, communicating them clearly, and then it sounds like being consistent with them across the board,
100%,
correct?
100%, 100%.
That's great advice. Do you have any other real advice for other leaders? Is there anything else that you think is really important?
I mean, being always ready to pivot. I mean, that's the biggest thing with a lot of entrepreneurs is 2020. If that showed us anything, um, if we were not ready to pivot and change to something we talked about before we came on air, those are the people that fell behind. The ones that are ready to pivot, like my main company, Crowe, where we started establishing, and this January 20th was 15 years we've been in business. I've pivoted a company maybe about 10 different times throughout the last 15 years. And it's always trying to be ahead of the curve, watching what the actual your customers are looking for, what the actual industry is pushing for. So being able to pivot. So in 2020, when March, April hit, companies that weren't ready to pivot or were not ready to take a chance to pivot all fell behind. And the gentlemen in, like, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're business, whatever you are, the ones that are ready to pivot and actually were able to pivot in the right direction all had incredible years. Like, we had probably our best year of most of our companies. And it's because we're able to see the market and pivot and not be scared to pivot and take chances when the opportunity came, right? So I think being able to pivot is the simplest, but it's probably the most authentic and real way to keep the business growing in any different direction, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned 2020. Obviously, that was hard to predict for everyone, pretty much, right? Maybe
Of
not everyone.
course.
Maybe some people could have predicted it, but that was a tough one. But I think your point in pivoting and looking ahead as much as we can. We don't anticipate such circumstances happening every year, right? We hope that
Yeah,
that's not the case.
of course. But like I said, when it doesn't matter circumstances that happen, whether, I mean, there's always something that's going to happen in life,
Yep.
whether somebody gets sick, we lose staff, people quit, people start new jobs, we have competition, other brands starting. You have to be able to be direct with your pivot and being, like I said, being ready and not being scared to pivot
Mhm.
and taking chances with your pivot. I mean, they're not always going to work. Some are going to fail, but being ready to change it. And then what I always say with people, when you do pivot to a new idea or a new concept, never fall in love with that concept because you might have to switch it like in seconds as well. So being able to be honest with yourself and see what is happening with that pivot, and when it's ready, move on. You'll be fine. You'll be fine with it.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you for sharing it. And you're right. Even those failures are necessary when you do pivot. You can cross something off the list. And so you tried that, that didn't work. We're going to try a
Yeah,
different approach, right? But being in the
100%.
moment and doing it quickly is so crucial.
Yeah, of course, of
Very
course.
cool. Well, before we get to our final question, are there any other successful executives such as yourself that you would like to acknowledge on this podcast?
My list, I could go on forever. 2020 has been the year where I really focused on networking, and through my podcast and through stuff like I was having virtual coffees probably about 10, 15 with new individuals a week and just building. So, I mean, I've built some incredible relationships, one with a gentleman named Mike Diamond, David Meltzer's, Brian Bogert. I mean, there's so many incredible entrepreneurs out there that you could always constantly learn. And people that are not networking, I mean, I'm always believing in putting yourselves with mentors or people you want to surround yourself with. And if you don't, I mean, spend $20, spend 2 weeks of your life and buy a book and indirectly get mentored by somebody as well, right? But in general, there's we live in a society with social media. You could literally network with anybody at any time.
Mhm.
And this we live, like I said, have so much opportunities to surround ourselves with individuals that we want to be or people that we're aiming to achieve to be. So I mean, just networking. And like I said, there's so much out there.
Definitely. And I love your advice on grabbing a virtual latte, right? People are accepting that more so than ever before. It's become the norm to connect virtually, right? I wouldn't have said that over a year and a half ago, that virtual is the number one way of connecting. We'd be flying, we'd be going in places, but
Yeah,
this is such a great, provides such great access to some extent, despite the challenges.
yeah, 100%.
Very cool. Well, our final question is more of a fun one. You've had this incredible career, but we always love to hear from our guests where they got started. So tell us about your first job.
First job. I had to think about this when I saw that. My first job was I was actually 13 years old. I was 13 years old. My mom was a daycare supervisor, and that summer, I had two little side hustles. I was selling sports cards on weekends at shows, making extra money, and then during the week, one full summer at 13, I worked at a daycare, just helping cleaning and doing stuff. So that was my first actual taste of working and doing anything. So I did that for 2 summers in a household. And then I ended up starting my first company at 17. So, and then from there on, I never worked for nobody. But 13 was my first actual real job that I got paid, which was it's quite a few years ago now when you think about it.
Nice. What a cool experience, though. Well,
Yeah.
Jeff, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about what you're up to?
I'm primarily more on IG, Instagram. So you could hit me at Jeff Lopes, JFF, LOPES at any time. And I'm great with DMs and great with answering. And then if you're a dad entrepreneur, you could hit me up at Jeffrey Lopes, JFF, RELY, LOPES, let me think about that.com. And I always love talking and helping entrepreneurial dads as well through that network.
Fantastic. Well, I so appreciate you joining us today. And thanks everyone for tuning in. This is Anna Crowe. For more insights, visit us at crowepr.com. Make it a great day.